A couple of years ago, I was in a rut. My job was draining, my social life was non-existent, and I felt like I was just going through the motions. One morning, on my way to work, I decided to stop at a small coffee shop I'd never been to before. It was cozy and smelled like freshly baked pastries, and for some reason, it felt like the right place to be. As I stood in line, I noticed the barista behind the counter. He had this warm, genuine smile that immediately put me at ease. When it was my turn to order, I stumbled over my words because of course I did, and he laughed softly, not in a mocking way, but in a way that made me laugh too. His name tag said Jake. I ordered a latte, and when he handed it to me, he said, "I added a little extra shot of happiness for you today." It was such a small thing, but it made me smile for the first time in weeks. After that, I started stopping by the coffee shop every morning, partly for the coffee, but mostly because Jake's positivity was contagious. One day, as I was leaving, he called out, "Hey, wait." I turned around and he handed me a small piece of paper. It was his number, scribbled on a napkin. He said, "I know this might be weird, but I'd love to take you out sometime. If you're interested, text me." I was surprised but also thrilled. I texted him later that day and we went on our first date that weekend. It was amazing. We talked for hours, and I felt like I'd known him forever. Jake was kind, funny, and had this way of making me feel like the most important person in the room. Over time, we grew closer, and he became my rock. He encouraged me to pursue my passions and helped me see the good in life again. That little coffee shop became our spot, and even now, we still go there sometimes to reminisce about how we met. A few years ago, I was going through a really tough time. I had just moved to a new city for work, and I didn't know anyone. I felt lonely and out of place, so I started spending my evenings at the local library. It became my safe haven, a quiet place where I could escape and lose myself in books. One evening, as I was browsing the fiction section, I noticed someone sitting at a nearby table. He had a stack of books in front of him and was scribbling notes furiously in a notebook. I couldn't help but glance over at him a few times. He looked up once, caught me staring, and smiled. I quickly looked away, embarrassed. The next week, I saw him again. This time, he was in the same section as me, pulling a book off the shelf. I recognized it as one of my favorites, so without thinking, I blurted out, "That's a great book." He turned to me, surprised but smiling, and said, "Oh yeah? What do you like about it?" We ended up talking for over an hour, right there in the library. His name was Alex, and he was a writer working on his first novel. He loved books as much as I did, and we quickly discovered we had a lot in common. From that day on, we started meeting at the library every week. We'd sit together, reading or talking about our favorite stories, and it became the highlight of my week. Over time, our friendship grew into something more. Alex was kind, thoughtful, and incredibly passionate about his work. He made me feel seen and understood in a way no one else ever had. One evening, as we were walking out of the library together, he stopped me and said, "I think I'm falling in love with you." I felt the same way, and I told him so. That moment changed everything. We started dating, and the library became our place. Even now, years later, we still go back there sometimes, just to sit and read together. It's where our story began, and it's a reminder of how something as simple as a shared love for books brought us together. A few years ago, I was commuting to work every day on the same train. It was a monotonous routine. Wake up, grab breakfast, rush to the station, and squeeze into a crowded train car. But one morning, something changed. As I was standing near the doors, trying not to spill my coffee, I noticed someone sitting across from me. She was reading a book, and I couldn't help but notice how engrossed she was. Her expression shifted with every page, smiling, frowning, even laughing softly at one point. I was intrigued. The next day, I saw her again. This time, she was wearing headphones and sketching in a notebook. I couldn't see what she was drawing, but her focus was mesmerizing. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing her more and more. She always seemed to be doing something creative, reading, drawing, or writing. I wanted to talk to her, but I didn't know how to start. One morning, as the train pulled into the station, she accidentally dropped her notebook. Pages scattered everywhere, and I instinctively bent down to help her pick them up. As I handed her the papers, I noticed they were filled with beautiful sketches and handwritten notes. I said, "These are amazing. Are you an artist?" She smiled and said, "Kind of. I'm a graphic designer, but I like to doodle in my free time." We started talking, and before I knew it, we had missed our stop. Her name was Clara, and she was just as interesting as I'd imagined. We ended up getting coffee together that morning, and it felt like we'd known each other for years. From that day on, we started meeting on the train every morning. Our conversations became the highlight of my day. Over time, our friendship grew into something deeper. Clara was creative, thoughtful, and had this incredible ability to see the beauty in everything. She inspired me to look at the world differently. Now, we still take the same train together, but it's no longer a monotonous routine. It's our time to talk, laugh, and just be together. That chance encounter on the train changed everything, and I'm so grateful for it. A few years ago, I was driving home after a long day when my car suddenly sputtered and died on a quiet, remote stretch of highway. I pulled over to the side of the road, frustrated and unsure of what to do. I didn't have cell service, and the sun was starting to set. I popped the hood and stared at the engine, hoping I'd magically figure out what was wrong, but I had no idea where to even start. Just as I was starting to panic, an old, beat-up truck pulled over behind me. A family stepped out. A man, his wife, and their young daughter. They didn't speak much English, but the man gestured to my car and then to himself as if to say, "Let me help." I was hesitant at first, but I could see the kindness in their eyes. The man and his wife got to work, tinkering with the engine while their daughter handed them tools from the truck. I stood there, feeling useless, but incredibly grateful. After about 20 minutes, it became clear that the car wasn't going to start. The man shook his head and said something in Spanish that I didn't understand, but his wife smiled and gestured for me to get into their truck. They drove me to the nearest gas station where I could call for help. When we arrived, I reached for my wallet, wanting to give them something, anything, to thank them. But the man gently pushed my hand away and said, "No, no." Then, with a warm smile, he said, "Today you, tomorrow me." Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. It was such a simple yet profound way of saying that today, they were helping me, but tomorrow someone else might help them. It was a reminder that kindness is cyclical, and that we're all in this together. That moment has stayed with me ever since. Whenever I see someone in need, I think of that family and their selfless act of love. It's inspired me to pay it forward whenever I can, because you never know how much a small act of kindness can mean to someone.